Take your seats. Do put your mobile phones on silent. We're about to begin shortly. Ladies and gentlemen, please gather around. Do put your mobile phones on silent. We're about to start shortly. Thank you.
Walk in? What? You wanna start? Yeah. Yeah. She's walking in.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you're all feeling this afternoon. We're absolutely delighted that you could be with us. Friends from the media, our colleagues, and of course, our well-wishers and enthusiasts from everywhere. Thank you very much for joining us once again. My name is Sunanda Wong, and I will take you through this beautiful launch. Ladies and gentlemen, a very, very happy Independence Day. Thank you very much for sharing this wonderful time and this little time that you could share with us for this fabulous launch. Now, this is a very, very special day for us, and perhaps we could not have chosen a better day for marking and celebrating the re-emergence of the iconic BSA Gold Star. Ladies and gentlemen, without any further ado, I would like to invite on stage a man whose vision is absolutely unparalleled, a leader amongst leaders. Ladies and gentlemen, the Chairman, Mahindra Group, Mr. Anand Mahindra. Please welcome Mr. Mahindra with the hugest round of applause.
A very good morning to all of you and a very happy Independence Day, first of all. On November 6th, 1944, 21-year-old Louis Banham landed on Gold Beach, Normandy. And all he had with him was his gun, some ammunition, and his old faithful, his M20 BSA. He was part of the dispatch riders in the war, 1,000 of them. And they would go over dunes, through craters, amongst bodies, and in one memorable occasion, even through a minefield. Dodging bullets through thick and thin, he would often sleep on his bike. Now, I checked that. I wanted to know, how do you sleep on a bike? But he said he would put his bedroll on the bike and his head on the tank, and that's how he would sleep, and never fell off, apparently. Now, that man, eventually, in 1945, after the ceasefire, was able to escape the Western Front, got back in one piece, him and his bike. And that old faithful is an iconic legend in the motorcycle industry today. It's one of the indelible stories of motorcycling history. Now, BSA had many stories apart from that. In fact, I went on to the net and checked, and there were a number of Indian dispatch riders as well. I wouldn't be surprised if some Indian soldier rode the BSA, like Louis Banham too. There are many stories. If you ask yourself, what is a brand? A brand is nothing but a collection of stories, of narratives, a montage of memories, symbolism. That's what makes up a brand. And so you have a number of stories that built up what the BSA brand is today. Essentially, it was battle-born, born to battle, whichever way you choose it. And that's a very, very powerful, enduring image, a very potent DNA that you have for any kind of brand. Ironically, today, we're also launching the new 5-door Thar in Cochin. And I thought about this and I said, you know, what's the core kernel brand of our utility vehicle, the Willys Jeep, which is what we licensed and sold here? It was Battleborn. And no matter how sophisticated these cars get, that Thar has got an amazing amount of technology today, but when you think of it, you think of its origins in battle. And that's what we have in the BSA as well. A very, very powerful story. Now, let me shift to another of our stories, which is part of our archives. How did we get into the BSA area? And I remember in 2016, David Bennett, this courageous Brit who kept the company, the shell company BSA alive, called me and said the brand is available for sale. I was very excited for the reasons I just mentioned. A very powerful brand just waiting for somebody to come in and revive it. So we started talking, and as often happens in the corporate world, sometimes bureaucracy gets the better of speed. And unfortunately, one of our competitors in India, a well-known competitor, was able to steal the deal away from us. I was crestfallen. And I told Anupam, I said, Anupam, we've lost it. 6 months later, I get a call from David. And he says, look, the other guy's just taking his own time. It's taking far too long. Are you still interested? I called, in the speed of lightning, I called Anupam, and we closed the deal in 48 hours and got BSA back. That's our story of BSA. And that's why we're here today. Now, let me talk a little bit about India. Very appropriate time on Independence Day. India is certainly on the rise. And this is not about data, about statistics. You can feel it. You can feel it in the air. There's enormous change. There's enormous potential. We are like an oasis of growth, the fastest growing large economy in the world. Yes, miles to go. We have to focus on our quality of life, improving that. That journey is going to be a long one. But it's an indubitable fact that India's time has come. And it's very interesting that when you look at what's happening with BSA, that's not our story alone. There are a number of Indian companies which have gone in and acquired British brands and are reviving them. Why is that? Because frankly, today India is the far larger economy. This is the economy that can give scale to a brand, that can allow people to speed up its resurrection. And I want to mark that when we do this, when we and other companies have acquired British brands, it's not with any kind of morbid sense of retribution or triumph. There is enormous affection. There's enormous affection for these British brands. There's an affinity and a sense of manifest destiny that it is our job to revive these brands. We're going to have fun doing this as well. And that indomitable spirit of the BSA, which I spoke to you about, embodied by Lewis Banham and others, I want to tell you is hardwired into the new Gold Star. I hope you all are going to get a chance to see it today. It's hardwired into it. It's embedded, that spirit, that DNA. So, on the 78th Independence Day of India, please join me in celebrating India's return to center stage. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.
Ladies and gentlemen, India's return to the center stage. How absolutely well said, sir. And ladies and gentlemen, of course, also the return of the BSA Gold Star. Thank you very much, Mr. Mahindra. Can we have a thunderous round of applause for Mr. Mahindra one more time? Thank you very much. And now, ladies and gentlemen, it gives me immense pleasure to introduce the man who does not need an introduction. Please welcome Mr. Alan Cathcart, world's top motorcycle journalist whose work is syndicated in many countries in the world. And here in India, of course, you have read many of his articles. And with Alan, hello. And with Alan, of course, we have Mr. James Hewing, one of the world's topmost authorities on classic heritage motorcycles. He is the director of the National Motorcycle Museum in Birmingham, UK.
Thank you very much, Nanda. And hello to all of you. I see many familiar faces in the audience. I'll look forward to chatting to some of you that I haven't had the chance to do so already with later on after the presentation. But I'd really like to thank Mr. Mahindra for his extremely stirring and, I must say, truthful address. It is a fact that you in India are going to be responsible for giving birth not only to the born-again version of the BSA brand, but also those of other famous British trademarks which have, for one reason or another, gone into liquidation. And a good example is what has already happened with Jaguar and Land Rover in the UK with Tata. So it's a wonderful opportunity to be here to address you. And I would like also personally to make one particular statement. I'm not here being paid by Mahindra or by Classic Legends to do so. I'm here because of the fact that I believe that what is happening with BSA is very much worth supporting. So I know that James Hewing, alongside me, has got a lot to tell you about how we got to this point. So James, I'll hand over to you if you could just give us the background to BSA's current and future existence.
Thank you, Alan. I'd echo Alan's sentiments. I've been involved with the project as museum director of the largest British motorcycle museum in the world for quite a long time now. And it's a great privilege to be here to be asked to address you by Ashish and Anupam. The National Motorcycle Museum, just to give you a quick overview, has over 1,000 British machines in the collection, so you can imagine it's a huge place, huge place. And we've got over 100 BSAs in the collection as well. So I like to think that we're something of an authority on BSAs. A fact that you might be interested in, so we're in Birmingham, the home of the original home of BSA. And the museum is only a few miles from the original factory site at Small Heath, which is an area of Birmingham, on Armoury Road in Small Heath there. And so we've got a great link in terms of geography as well. BSA actually goes back, the name BSA goes back to the very early days. It's back to 1851. And I've found in my years, my 11 years as museum director there, even now, 50 years after the factory shut, everybody still knows somebody that worked there. It was such a big employer. It was such a huge part of Birmingham. Biggest motorcycle manufacturer in the world at the end of the day. So you can imagine how many local people it employed. Everybody knew somebody that worked there. A brother, a father, a mother, a sister, a cousin. Everybody knew somebody that worked there. In fact, after the war, at its height, there was over 30,000 people worked for BSA. I met Ashish and Anupam and the guys from BSA a few years ago now, in the very early days when they visited the museum to look at the BSAs that we've got in the collection, because there's nowhere in the world that you can see more of the heritage bikes. And obviously the guys were looking at the styling cues, at the colours, at the names. This was very, very early days. And they visited many times over the years, and that culminated a few years ago in a design clinic, let's call it, where they had one of the rooms at the museum, and they got together with a lot of industry people, and also owners' clubs, because owners' clubs, a bit like in India, are very big things in the UK. And so they got together with people from the BSA Owners Club, people that were invested in the brand. And at that stage, we were all presented with really just a paper sketch of what the bike potentially was going to look like. And a twin cylinder was also discussed as well as the single cylinder. It was decided against that for very good reason, because what they wanted to do, even at the very early stage, was focus on one of the most famous names within the BSA brand, and that is the name Gold Star. It's been, again, a great privilege of mine that Ashish personally has asked me to write a definitive book on BSA. A coffee table book, you know, the big heavy ones with all the pictures. And I want that to be the definitive guide of the history. And that's why I want to just touch on a little bit of the history now, because a lot of you guys, quite naturally, won't know. I've described what a big brand it was and what a huge employer, but maybe you won't necessarily know where it all came from. Well, it actually goes back to 1854, when 14 gunsmiths, people that made guns, armaments, pistols, rifles, cannon, etc., got together in a loose collective, because Birmingham in the UK was the centre, already one of the centres of the arms trade. And in 1861, the loose collective formed a proper company, and that's where the BSA company was first formed, the BSA Company Limited. And of course, what does BSA stand for? It stands for Birmingham Small Arms. And outside on the heritage wall there, you'll see one of the early logos, and you'll see that that logo comprises 3 rifles piled together, and that logo is called the Piled Arms. 3 guns piled together, and so that's the very early history of BSA. And of course, BSA remained an arms manufacturer pretty much all through the next century. In 1863, they built the factory on Army Road at Small Heath that I was describing earlier on. Huge factory that expanded over the years. And that was BSA's home for the next 100 years, until the company finally finished in the UK in 1973. Like a lot of manufacturers, engineering companies, they tried their hand at 2 wheels, and they started by making a bicycle. But it's not a bicycle like you guys would recognise necessarily. It was a funny contraption with 2 big wheels at the side, and that was called the dicycle, of all things. But quite soon after that, they developed their own conventional bicycle, a bicycle that you would recognise today. The first motorcycle that BSA made was actually 1904. So up until that time, they'd been making armaments. That was the main interest. They'd been making push bikes, bicycles. And then in 1904, they made the first motorcycle, but it wasn't the first true BSA, because that got an engine that was bought in from another manufacturer, from Minerva. The first true BSA didn't come about until 1910, when it was finally ready for the Earl's Court show in London. That was the big motorcycle show at the time in 1910. And that was the 3.5 horsepower bike. And it was ready for the 1911 season. And an interesting fact about that motorcycle was it was so well made, because the engineering skills from making armaments, BSA had a very, very highly skilled workforce. And so this bike was so good, it was so reliable, that it completely sold out. The production completely sold out for the next few years. 1911, 1912, 1913, sold out completely. Obviously, the First World War came, and BSA went back to making mainly arms, but also motorcycles for the armed forces. Important to mention the next period, the 1920s and the 1930s, because it was the 1930s that brought about the name Gold Star. Some of you may know, if you know your racing circuits and historic circuits, in the UK there was a banked circuit called Brooklands with big banked corners. Part of it is still there now. But if you did it over 100 miles an hour at the Brooklands Bank Circuit, you were awarded as a prize a gold star. And in 1937, BSA's works rider, a guy called Wal Handley, he was awarded a gold star for doing a lap of 102 miles an hour on a BSA Empire Star. So BSA were already using the name Star. And that bike, that win, then brought about BSA manufacturing for the first time bikes with the Gold Star name, 3 different variants. 1939-45, the war, Mr. Mahindra mentioned this. BSA made more bikes for the armed forces, the Allies, than any other manufacturer. 126,334 M20s. You can tell them right in a book, can't you? That's one of those figures. So a lot of bikes, more bikes than all the other manufacturers. And in fact, so many that BSA's advertising post-war did talk about this. They made a big thing of it. 1 in 4 was a BSA. So 1 in 4 bikes produced for the armed forces was a BSA. The factory actually suffered a bombing raid in the Blitz in 1940 that left 53 dead and 89 injured, but production carried on. Moving swiftly to the 1950s, again, many of you won't know that BSA actually bought another very famous British name back in 1951. They purchased Triumph. So BSA and Triumph became one company, in effect. BSA purchased Triumph. And the 50s were very, very successful for BSA in terms of the range, because they had motorcycles from 125cc right up to 650cc in single cylinder, twin cylinders, latterly into the late 1960s, 3 cylinders, 2 strokes, 4 strokes. They made a bike for absolutely everybody, the biggest motorcycle manufacturer in the world. So much so that when another famous name, Norton, which I'm sure many of you have heard of, another brand that's come back to life, as it were, when Norton made 10,000, we were making 50,000 bikes a year. That's how big a company it was in the UK. Everybody knew somebody in Birmingham, where the museum is, that worked there. Strong sales in the 1960s. BSA had a huge export market to the United States. It was their biggest market. And unfortunately, despite some big investment in the 1960s, would you believe BSA was the first company to have a conventional motorcycle company to introduce a conventional car-type production system, and they actually used one of the first computers to control that. So they had big investment, but despite that, they missed 2 crucial sales seasons in America. One in the late 60s, one in the early 70s. This caused terrible cash flow problems and ultimately finished in a reverse takeover by Norton, of all people, in 1973, and that's when the old company finished. So that's a little bit of a short history of BSA, just trying to impart what a huge company it was in the UK, biggest in the world. And so all these years that I've been in motorcycling, museum director, similar job for 10 years before that, riding since I was 13, 14, I could never understand why smaller names like Triumph had been bought back, or Norton had come back. Companies, great companies, big companies, but companies that were smaller than BSA. And so it gave me so much pleasure personally when I met Ashish and Anupam, and they'd purchased, Classic Legends were going to bring back the BSA name, because it was amazing that nobody had done it before. You imagine the interest in the UK alone. Huge owners clubs, huge interest still, but to revive that brand has been a huge thing for the UK, and now a huge thing for India. And again, to reflect what Alan said, it's such a positive thing. It's such a positive thing. Lastly, I would just like to say, because like Alan, I'm completely dispassionate. I've worked with the guys on developing the bike, and so what I say really from the heart. But as somebody that's personally so invested in the heritage of the brand, what the brand means to me personally, I can honestly say that bringing a brand back, it takes all sorts of things. Of course, it takes investment and commitment and all those throwaway things that we could say about that, all those words. But to bring a motorcycle brand back, motorcycling is a funny thing. It's not like buying a washing machine or a fridge. It's a heart purchase. It's not a head purchase. And so to bring a completely understand it, you've got to have it in there. And I know, having worked with the guys, Ashish, Anupam, for the last 6-7 years now, on and off, that the brand is completely in the right hands with CLPL, with Ashish, with Anupam. You've heard from Mr. Mahindra there, completely in the right hands, and I applaud what they've done.
Thank you, James, and I second that emotion. I think the most important thing is what's happened since that day in 2016 when, as Mr. Mahindra explained, he purchased the BSA trademark from BSA Regal. The trademark, that's all that he purchased. So the rest had to come from whatever Classic Legends was able to do itself. Okay, we've got the name. How do we build a motorcycle? They did several, in my opinion, very intelligent, right partners. The heart of a motorcycle is the engine. How do we get an engine to power a future BSA? At this stage, not necessarily a Gold Star. Could have been one of many other famous model names within the BSA brand. They went to the people who probably secretively, not many of you may know this, even though you are motorcycle experts, who have developed the biggest range of single-cylinder motorcycles in Europe, but they've also done a couple of twins as well. And that's a technical university in Austria, in Graz, which is one of the third biggest city in Austria, in the very far south. And they work closely with KTM in developing their new power plants, their new engines. Before that, though, we had to have the basis of an engine. So Classic Legends went to Rotax, again in Austria, and again a very well-respected engine developer. They don't make their own motorcycles. All they do is build power plants for other people. They acquired a design which Rotax had done some years ago, but in those days it was only for a carburetted single-cylinder, 650, and for a Euro 2 compliance for noise and for emissions. Now we're up to Euro 5. So essentially all they were doing was buying the hardware. They then took it to Graz, with whom Rotax had already collaborated in the past, and Graz developed the engine that's in that motorcycle that you see me riding in that photo. The next thing was that they had to have a platform to put it in. Okay, Britain has traditionally been the world's experts in chassis design and technology. Think of all the small specialist manufacturers like Rickman and Dresda and so on, who have built motorcycles down the years, putting a frame around a Japanese motorcycle to make it handle, a Japanese engine to make it handle. So they employed a development company called Ricardo. Ricardo is one of the largest vehicle development manufacturers companies in the world, and they mostly do cars, but there is a separate motorcycle division based in Colville, Leicestershire, and they also have another larger R&D centre in Leamington Spa, very close to Birmingham. So Classic Legends began working with Ricardo to develop the platform for the engine, which was being developed in Austria. But now, how are we going to clothe it? What are we going to style it as? And again, this is something where they wanted evidently to use the British designer who would be able to impart the sense of Britishness that they wanted to achieve with the born-again BSA. By this stage, they had decided to make a single, and I'll come to that in a minute. But the single-cylinder engine was a big single, a 650. The reason being that a 500 would have been the traditional capacity for a single-cylinder engine, but unfortunately, the ongoing weight of noise and emissions regulations means that you're depriving performance, depriving the engine of performance, so you need to have a large capacity engine to get the same performance as a smaller capacity one would have had. Hence the 650. It's a modern single, big single. It all came together publicly at the Birmingham show in November 2021, when the new BSA Gold Star was launched, to massively positive reception on the part of not only the press, like yourselves, in Britain and other parts of Europe, but also the public. And I can probably guess how happy Ashish and his team were when the ultra-positive reports came in. I was then one of the first people fortunate enough to ride the motorcycle the following year. In fact, I was the first person outside Classic Legends to actually physically ride it in public. And this was at the Goodwood Festival of Speed, which, as you may know, takes place every year in June or July. And it's a ride up the Duke of Richmond's private driveway to his stately home on the south coast of England. Cars and bikes take it in turn to do this. Massive event, 100,000 people plus per day, each day. I was the first one to ride the Gold Star up the hill, except it rained on my parade. And with all the cars, there was loads of oil on the track. And I could see it glistening in front of me as I took off, and then I had to go around the first corner, very gingerly. But that taught me something about the BSA Gold Star, because at very low throttle openings, I was completely in control. And as I opened the throttle on this ultra-slippery surface, the bike behaved and responded in a completely linear way. And all of you have ridden certain motorcycles, I'm not going to name them obviously, but certain motorcycles, particularly in the middleweight category, where when you open the throttle, you get a jerk. And you're not in control. Well, even experienced riders like myself don't like that, and particularly not younger riders, novices, people who are just now getting their, in Europe, A2 license. So that was pretty impressive. And then going past the Duke's house, there's a sort of a straight, and I got up to a bit of speed and thought, pretty nice. But I only did that once. So I had to wait till another 3 months later when that photograph was taken. And that was at the Millbrook Proving Grounds in Bedfordshire in England, which is used by all the British and some continental vehicle manufacturers, primarily car manufacturers, to develop their new vehicles. BSA took it over for a day. And what it did was to give us, in closed course situations, a safe way of testing the bike to the maximum in real-world conditions. So in other words, you have a simulated city streets section. There's another one with very bumpy surface, bumps in corners, bumps in a straight line, to see how it all handles. I was truly impressed. As many of you know, I was fortunate enough to race single-cylinder bikes very successfully. I was European Super Mono champion. I also won the Japanese, the Australian, and the Dutch Open, and the British Super Mono championships. So I know how a good single should behave. Take it from me, this is a good single. But it's a good single in real-world riding. And in India, real-world riding is different than it is in Europe. Because of the congestion you have, because of the lack of open roads where you can keep high speeds up for hours at a time. So the average speed, I would imagine, in India is between 40 and 60 kilometers per hour in the real world. And where this bike is so good is in the way that the Classic Legends development team have developed a completely linear power band with that extremely smooth and controllable pickup from a closed throttle. There's 55 Newton meters of torque available. And 60% of that is available at just 1800 RPM. So you've got this torquey motor that has a very flat torque curve, but it's also pretty potent. The Gold Star should be able to do 100 miles an hour, as James has just explained. That's where the name came from. Well, I was able to prove to my satisfaction that it would do 100 miles an hour on a controlled basis. So it's a bike that lives up to its billing. I think the other thing I'd like to point out is that it looks like a classic Gold Star should look. The styling team at Redline Studios did a really great job on producing a bike that has all the design references of the traditional bike, but at the same time in a modern context. And Bal Gattori, who was the chief designer of Redline, is actually an Indian. He was born in London to Indian parents. And he'd never been to Leicester, which is the headquarters of the Indian community in the UK. Redline happens to be in Leicester, just by accident. And he came to live in Leicester, worked on the BSA, and James's museum is less than half an hour away, which is why he could go in there every day to develop it. So it looks great. Okay, looks great, handles brilliantly, it's got a great engine, but it's not a twin. Should it be a twin? Could be. BSA made many twins and triples, as James said, eventually. Is a twin-cylinder 650 better than a single-cylinder 650? Well, that depends on the use that you put it to, and particularly on the performance that you're looking for. I happen to believe that a 650 single is better than a 650 twin. I know there are certain people in India who will disagree with me, and certain manufacturers who would disagree with me. But why do I say that? With a single, you feel part of the bike. It's narrow, it's slim, it's relatively light, you get a good power-to-weight ratio, but you're in charge, particularly when it comes to tight corners, handling conditions where you want to be able to change direction easily from one side to the other. A twin has maybe more power, but at the end of the day, in terms of getting from A to B faster and more controllably, singles are best. So I'd just like to say to you that when you all do get the chance to ride the new BSA, as I'm sure you will quite soon, just think about what conditions you're riding it in. I think in India, a single is probably, in almost all situations, going to be the most desirable way of getting from A to B. Thanks very much, and enjoy your ride. Now, I should say that there is one person who has spent, outside Classic Legends, who has spent more miles on a BSA single than anybody else, and he's standing right next to me. James.
Well, thank you, Alan. Very, very briefly, and then obviously we'll carry on with the presentation and the bit that you're all waiting for. But thanks to our friend Luke at Lucas Distribution in the UK, who's in the audience today. I've ridden one for most of this year, and like a lot of you guys and girls, I've ridden a lot of big bikes. I've got big bikes personally, 1000cc, 1100cc, 1200cc. But for all of this year, I've been riding, there I am. Not a good picture like Alan's, but there I am on a day's ride on the Goldie where I live in Derbyshire, which is very rural place. And like Alan was saying, real world conditions, twisty roads. And, you know, talk about BSA, Classic Legends, honouring the heritage. I can honestly say that when you pull up at a petrol station or a cafe, in many years of riding, I can't remember a time when it's a bike, no matter what bike that was, whether it was a Ducati or a Harley or Triumph or whatever else, I can't remember a time when a bike's attracted so much attention from people, from British riders, from old guys that used to ride BSA, from younger riders. What's that? Real attention grabber. And again, just to echo what Alan was saying, and Alan should know his experience of singles. You can imagine if I've been riding that all year, all my friends that I ride with, they've not gone down in capacity. They're all still riding their 1100s and 1200s and what have you. And it's been so much fun keeping up with them on that bike. And you say you're not going to keep up with them on that bike? What, on twisty back roads? Yeah, you can, because the handling is great. Brembo brakes, the braking is great. Straight out of the crate, straight from the factory. It's a great handling bike with those Pirelli Phantoms that you guys are also going to get. It's a bike that's perfect straight out the crate. And again, as Alan said, and Alan knows better than anybody, very linear power delivery, fantastic mid-range, real-world riding conditions, not track days, not where most people don't ride, but how most people ride. It's a fantastic bike straight out of the crate.
I second that emotion.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Alan. And thank you, James, for your experience and, of course, your insight and a little bit more about the bike, and also giving us an initiation into the history of BSA. And now, ladies and gentlemen, moving forward, it is my good pleasure to introduce Mr. Stephen Knight, the brilliant mind behind the globally acclaimed series Peaky Blinders. Now, Stephen Knight is not just a fan. In fact, he has some historical links to BSA. Please be entertained.
Hello, this is Stephen Knight. I would really love to have been there today. I can't get there. I'm very passionate about BSA. My mother worked there during the Second World War, and I have good friends who work there now. Just fantastic that BSA bikes are being made again. So good luck with everything. I am absolutely 100% in support.
A true enthusiast there, Mr. Knight. And now, ladies and gentlemen, if you were wondering that what makes BSA a legend, what did the star and how did the star actually come about to its being? Let's immerse ourselves in the captivating story behind the iconic Gold Star. Take a look.
What defines a star and what defines a motorcycle which has a star affixed to it? Hi, I'm Adil Jal Darukhanawala, and we get all guns blazing. BSA made its first bike in 1903, but it never went into production till 1910, when a 3.5 horsepower motorcycle for the masses started rolling out from the small Heath factory. World War I saw a lot of BSAs join the British Army, and that helped the brand get a lot of prominence. In the 1920s, its 493cc side valve M24 engine became very famous with a lot of people across the globe. BSA saw an opportunity to make a slightly high performance version of this motorcycle, and they affixed a small red star on the crankcase. That's when the Star series began. British Motorcycle Racing Club used to award a very prestigious Gold Star badge to anyone who raced at Brooklands and did a lap of the circuit at 100 miles per hour or above. A special model of the M23 Empire Star. They gave it really high compression pistons. They made it sip alcohol fuel. Wal Handley was given the bike, and he was entered for a 3-lap race at Brooklands. And in that race, he was passing, overtaking other riders who had started before him with gay abandon. He went on to win the 3-lap race at an average speed of 102 miles per hour plus. But he also set the fastest lap of the race there at 107 miles per hour plus, 2 gold stars in one fell swoop. Was something too good to be true, but BSA understood the value of it. They got it going in the form of a production version of that bike in the 1938, and from there on, the history of the brand took a different trajectory, and it went on to reside in the minds of performance bikers the world over. What's not to like about a Gold Star or a BSA for that matter? You rode from your house to the racetrack, removed the headlamp or taped it up, put on a competition number, a fry screen, rear sets, raced, probably won, got out of the bike from the paddock, reverted it back to road trim, and you rode back home. That was the beauty of these bikes.
Well, with that sort of rich history, what's not to like about the bike, ladies and gentlemen? And now, let me take you through a whirlwind journey in the past, where it all started. It takes beyond craftsmanship, beyond dedication and passion to create a gold standard machine the world celebrates. And this is what goes into the making of the Gold Star.
BSA stands for Birmingham Small Arms, and we have Birmingham in the name of the company, and which is why Birmingham is such a special place to us. It's in our DNA. For us, it was also a very special place because it was where BSA motorcycles were first born. The most challenging part of this project was managing the geographies. People being located in various parts of the world. We had our design teams here in the UK, we had our engineering teams in the UK, but we had our engine team, for example, based out of Austria.
CLPL had a great idea to collect all the possible team members at the Motorbike Museum in Birmingham. And here we were seeing each other the first time and discussing what is the DNA of the product.
We also had some support back from the R&D center in India. So managing all of that, and then came COVID.
It really matters who you have on the bus with you when you're onto such a wonderful and exciting journey. The relationships were amazing, primarily the bandwidth at which we both interacted in terms of our technical expertise and technical understanding.
Keeping its heritage alive, we wanted British engineers, British designers to work on it.
Everyone's association for BSA is with a classic brand, so it didn't take long for us to hone down on the fact that we're not doing a brand new modern bike, it's a classic retro heritage bike. The aim was that this bike was going to be a bike full of character, so we're not aiming for high top speed, the fastest, 0 to 60, none of that. It's all about the character.
The answer is very easy. My next bike in the garage will be exactly this bike.
I definitely think we've answered the brief and produced an undeniably BSA look.
To work on such an iconic project itself is a dream.
Well, in all honesty, this is just the beginning. BSA has a long road to travel again.
What an absolutely handsome machine that is, ladies and gentlemen. And now, ladies and gentlemen, the moment we all have congregated here for, yeah? The launch of this beautiful, beautiful bike that we've been talking about, the BSA Gold Star. Without any further ado, I think let's take a look at the launch video. Take a look. ladies and gentlemen, let's have a huge round of applause for the re-emergence of the Gold Star. We can have a more enthusiastic round of applause. Wonderful, thank you. And now, ladies and gentlemen, it is that time that I call upon the very favorite, everybody's favorite, the three amigos, and of course, Ashish to come up on stage for a photo opportunity. Welcome.
The product. Now, we have a few messages from some of our development partners at Redline, at the TU Graz, and at Ricardo. Let's have a quick look at their messages and then go on from there. Could we have the AVs, please?
Hello everybody, my name's Alan Ainsworth. I'm one of the directors and designers here at Redline Studios based in the UK. Firstly, my apologies for not being able to join you. Work commitments have kept me in the UK, but hopefully you're enjoying the launch and the show is going well and you're enjoying what you see as well. This is just a quick message from myself and on behalf of the Redline team, just to say how delighted we were and what a privilege it was to be able to help not only resurrect the BSA brand, but work on a bike as iconic as the Gold Star. Really the jewel in the crown for BSA. I think we delivered. I hope you agree. Working with the Classic Legends team was a pleasure and a privilege. Very talented and very enthusiastic people. So thank you again to the Classic Legends guys. I hope you enjoy the rest of the launch, and I look forward to seeing the Goldie being ridden around India. Bye-bye.
Hello, my name is Roland Kirchberger. I am heading the team of design engineers at FVT in Austria. I was surprised and very happy to be invited from Classic Legends to design the new BSA engine in a unique team that was formed by Indian engineers, British engineers and Austrian engineers. It was real fun to develop this new engine. And the engine is very good. You will test and ride it. I wish you all the best for the launching of the product and enjoy the ride.
Hi, I'm Mike Bartholomew. I was the engineering manager for Ricardo Motorcycles in the UK when CLPL invited us to be involved with the resurrection of the BSA motorcycle mark. I was super excited at the time to be involved with the design and development of a modern classic under the BSA name, and especially given my keenness on motorcycles and the history of the BSA brand in the UK. The project was fun. I enjoyed it, especially working with the team in Austria and of course the guys in India. I hope you enjoy riding the bike as much as I enjoyed working on the project.
All right, we've heard from some of the partners that we have. Can we have the product presentation on, please? All right, we've seen the motorcycle in live here now. Let's talk a little bit about what was the consideration when we were reviving the BSA mark and the Gold Star in particular. What did we want to do? We wanted to start off with a classic heritage motorcycle with quintessential British styling on it. Because it was a Gold Star, it had to be a single. Remember, bulk of the Gold Stars were 500 singles. And we wanted to contemporize it, modernize it. And that is what we attempted to do. Now, before we go in further, let me get in some of our team, the engineers and the people behind the motorcycle. Could we have on stage our heads of R&D, Imran, Sushil, and Prasad, and our Chief Operating Officer, Lalit Verma, please. Ladies and gentlemen, big hand. Now, what was the brief given to our engineering teams? We were going to do a single. It was a big single. Now, what is that big single? It's a 100-dia piston. And all of you who are here, please take a look at the cut section of that engine, which is a working cut section, which is outside. You will appreciate what that big single actually means. Now, this big single had to have low-speed tractability and had to be a ton-up motorcycle. Now, what is a ton-up motorcycle? It's a very British way of saying that this motorcycle was capable of 100 miles per hour and more. The old Gold Stars always had that ability. And when we were doing a Gold Star, to stay true to its name and its heritage, this had to be a ton-up motorcycle. So the speed, the top speed of this motorcycle is in excess of 163 kilometers per hour. That is 100 miles per hour. It also had to have our signature best-in-class braking, best-in-class handling, and an unbeatable segment-defining NVH characteristic. Now, how did all this happen? Let me put Imran in front here and let him explain how him and the team managed to do all of this. Imran, over to you.
Thank you so much, Ashish. A product brief, a big single, unbeatable segment defining NVH. How do you do it? How do you get a big single into a motorcycle? That was the question which was in front of us. Let's understand the journey. The journey that has created this legend. And let's understand the reasons behind why this motorcycle happens to be the segment best in all that we say. Look at the screen. Specifications. Any motorcycle, a starting point. But focus on one thing. Focus on the seat height. The moment you put that big single in, the fuel tank moves up, the seat moves up, and what we yearn for, what we planned for, a motorcycle that had a stance, a classic stance, very approachable, that goes for a toss. So what do? We huddle again, we sit down, and we figure out a way. What is a way? Look on the screen. What do you see here? That is the solution that we offer. Move the sump out of the engine. Let's take the oil away from the engine. In doing so, we managed to get the engine located further below. And that's how the motorcycle had an engine which was sitting lower on the frame. Yes, we have Pirelli tires. Yes, we have Continental brakes. The ABS 0.9G equivalent to a Formula 1 deceleration. Yes, we all have all of that. But the highlight happens to be the sump that has been placed outside. And why so? Obviously, ergonomics had to be precise. This is something we feel very proud about. Our motorcycles are known to handle well. They are known to be approachable. At the same time, it has to have a balance both in slow speeds as well as in high speeds. How can this be achieved? By having a low center of gravity. So these were the challenges when we had started working on the big single. And in doing so, packaging or the performance. These were secondary factors. The first factor was really to integrate this powertrain onto the motorcycle. And while doing this, how do you build a class-leading, class-defining NVH character on the motorcycle? Look at all the stars. Look at all the dots on the screen. A lot of work has gone behind doing what we have done so far. But I can tell you, this motorcycle being the biggest single in the segment has been appreciated globally by the global press as having one of the best NVH characters in the segment. Coming next, obviously a big single means you cannot compromise on performance. Look at the torque curve. What do you expect here? 3,000 to 6,000 RPM. Absolutely flat torque curve. So when Alan and James mentioned about the low speed drivability and the quick tractability of this motorcycle, you need to ride it to feel it. The motorcycle is a very different beast under 2,000 RPM. It will purr nice and smooth, a very classic note, a very easygoing motorcycle just under 2,000 RPM. And you open the throttle, and it is throttle happy. Look at the power delivery, look at the instantaneous torque that comes in. That is what we are talking about on the Gold Star. The secret of getting to the levels of NVH that we spoke about. On the screen, you see a silent chain. Yes, a silent chain on a 650cc motorcycle. But the highlight of this, there's a 3-point guide. That guide that you see there is an additional guide as compared to most other silent chains. And this really takes care of the other attributes of NVH, which most motorcycles might have struggled with. At the same time, an assistant slipper clutch, a balancer, which has got helical gears that takes care of NVH. all in all, a beautifully running engine. Moving the oil out of the engine further enables cooling. We are able to optimize the way our coolant system works. But the most important highlight, the moment the engine comes down, the center of gravity is what you gain benefit from. So now the motorcycle handles much more beautifully. Yes, the engine has been put through all other tests to ensure that the product is up to the mark. What you see on the screen has been a cycle of optimization that we've carried. Another important feature on this motorcycle is a patent tech on the intake system. Here, we cut down the intake induction sound by almost 2 dB. And that really helps you focus on the exhaust note. Finally, transmission. One of the quickest, slickest, easy shifting transmission. By far, in high speeds or in low speeds, you will effortlessly shift. The attributes of handling. And the secret behind this. This motorcycle has gone through a series of validations to tune the character of steering, to tune the character of suspensions. And mind you, this has been validated both virtually as well as in the real world through multiple iterations of trials. The center to all of this, the frame that holds the entire motorcycle together. Durability, reliability, strength, all taken care of. Finally, when everything comes together, a motorcycle that feels good, that does justice to the rider by not transmitting the NVH responses coming in from a powertrain or from a road excitation. That is what we are talking about. So how do you tune the dampers? How do you get these to act along with the motorcycle? That is the secret behind the NVH character. And like we all know, we've been absolutely particular about safety, about the way we brake. And staying best in class is something which we don't want to compromise on. The 0.9 G levels of acceleration. This is a USP which we do not want to let go. Having said that, let's make sure that this motorcycle is ready for the world. The world gets a package which they can depend upon. We've put it through every single trial that this motorcycle could go through to ensure that this is the perfect bike for you. Thank you very much. May I invite Ashish once again on the stage to continue this presentation, please.
All right. So guys, we've covered some part of the product. We've shown the product. There's one essential part which is left over. We're going to be doing a round table upstairs, so we will take questions there. But there is one essential part which is left over. I can see Adil raising his hand there. Adil, we'll do questions later.
But still, can I ask one question?
How can I refuse you?
Ashish, did only COVID stop you from coming quicker, or was there something else behind the development of the bike in timeline terms?
I think I will defer the question to our co-founder and my friend, AT.
Hi, Anupam.
Hey, guys.
You're in the hot seat now.
Sorry, I thought we were taking questions upstairs. Adil, you really want to go for this?
Yes.
So I think no, you have to realize firstly. Sorry, you want me to go there? This is a bike which has come first from UK, then to Europe, Japan. We have a Japanese distributor. Good to see you here. And then it came to India, right? And probably that's the right provenance. The bike had to start there and come here. So that's point number one. I think the other brand answer which you should know is that I personally think, and you are all experts, from a branding point of view, you cannot extend a brand in all directions. They break, right? So for example, a sports car or a speedster or a luxury car, when they get into an entry-level car, maybe the brand won't hold, and vice versa, right? So at least I was very clear in my head that for India, we need to have the most adored India brand, which is Yazdi. For the communist part of the world, at the previously, like Slovakia, I shouldn't be using the word in today's context, but you know, the whole of Eastern Europe, which you call today, parts of Central America, South America, Africa, Java was the largest selling bike, right? Millions of bikes were being sold. And for the Western world, it was BSA, right? So if you look at how we traverse this journey, Java gave us right to passage to launch a Yazdi, and BSA with the provenance of UK came to India. So that's what we did. Right?
3 brands, plethora of bikes in such a short time is a different dimension altogether.
Yes, and so you're right. People don't realize that we are a fledgling, normally 4-year-old company, 3 brands, 9 motorcycles, 3 engine platforms, and I think we haven't stopped yet. You guys are all, most of you know, you guys are invited to be with us on 3rd of September, and you will see more from us. But I think the BSA brand, there is a purpose we had. You know, all of us do this for business. We do this because we want to sell bikes, grow this company, so on and so forth. But here there was also a larger purpose, Adi. I mean, you talked about the war, and I think most of you know that story, that post the World War II, picture this when people were coming back, these young guys, young soldiers were not just getting medals and memories back, they were getting a lot of baggage back. And I don't know if PTSD was a term out there, but when I read these articles, or when I was reading these articles, it was very clear to me that motorcycling at that time took these guys out of that phase. They had lost a sense of purpose, meaning they came back, they were doing a menial job in the European country.
So to speak.
Absolutely. And that's how the motorcycling took off. And when the motorcycling took off, BSA took off. Right? For me, that's a very important part of BSA heritage. Right? Now, all of us know that the age of the rider, the average age is getting older. Right? And if you look at current time, aren't we fighting our own battles today? Right? Aren't the young guys fighting have their own challenges? Right? So for me, the larger picture sitting out here, and I often quote, there is a very nice saying, and I'm sure all of you have read the Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance, at least for Bible for me. It says the test of a machine is the satisfaction it gives you. If it doesn't, it's wrong. If the machine gives you tranquility, it is right. And it is wrong till you change the machine or your mind. Now, I wanted this machine to be the machine that changed the mind. Right? So can we get the world back into motorcycling?
Absolutely.
Can BSA be that thing that can get the world back into motorcycling? If we can rekindle that thought, if we can play that little bit of part, I would say join.
I'll just share a little bit of my experience riding this bike. I've been riding this now for the better part of 3 months, and everything which Alan and gang said for UK, and that median of 50 to 60 kilometers per hour on our roads stands true. But in India, that silky smoothness in that band till about 50, 60, everyone can savor. But if the true motorcyclist wants to have a slight thrill to just ring the throttle open, that explosive mid-end is something to die for. Honestly speaking, you need to ride that bike post 3,500 RPM, and it just pulls. I'm not one to
waiting
do...
for the prize. Both of us will bore the hell out of them. I think
No,
we should both shut up.
there's one more thing. There are historians who gave about BSA history. BSA also made 50cc clip-on engines. They missed out completely. One more thing, Java and Yazdi, there's a link to BSA. Farooq Irani, the chairman of Ideal Java, had once gone to England and picked up the conical BSA brakes because some of the Java brakes were not up to par, and he had got them here. So there is still a lot of linkages between all the brands which you hold.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks, Eti. Thanks, Adil. And guys, now the moment that we've all been waiting for. We've seen the bike, we've heard the experts, we know the specifications, but do we know the price? So, without further ado, let me put on the price on the screen, please.